Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Council of European Energy Regulators Customer Conference 2022. My name is Sonja van Rensen, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator this afternoon. I'm an energy and climate journalist based here in Brussels, and I'm editor-in-chief of Energy Monitor. That's energymonitor.ai, a website dedicated to the global energy transition. So we're here today to talk about some extremely topical issues: energy price spikes, the green transition, and how we empower consumers to navigate and make their way through these very challenging times. What we want to do, we've got two sessions. We've got a first session that's a little bit broader to talk about developments affecting energy markets, notably digitalization and decarbonization, and what kind of tools are available to help consumers make the most of these trends. And then we've got a second session, which is going to focus more on, I suppose, the nitty-gritty of today, these extremely high energy prices we're facing. And we're looking for some really practical tools that will help consumers live their lives and make their way through what are for some very high energy bills. So we have great speakers, obviously, but we also want to take your questions. And you should see, if you're on the live stream here, on the right-hand side of your screen, a Slido box, which will enable you to put your questions to us, and they'll come through to me here. And obviously, we'll try and take as many of those questions as we can. So the way we structured it is we're going to hear from a series of speakers in each session. Those presentations will be about 10 minutes each. We'll save up your questions and we'll take those in a dedicated Q&A slot at the end. The session today, or the whole conference, is being recorded, so if you wish to revisit any of it at a later date, you can obviously do so at your leisure. And with that, well, a welcome once again to all of you joining us from afar, and to those of you in the room. It's very nice to be in a room with people other than myself, pets, children, other guests who you don't necessarily always want present when you're moderating. So thank you also to CEER for organizing this afternoon and making the effort to have both a physical and at the same time a broader virtual reality here today. And with that, I'd like to welcome our very first speaker, who I'm pleased to see is also here. And this is Annegret Greubel, president of CEER. She has been since the start of 2019. Prior to that was vice president. And her job, her real job, is with the Bundesnetzagentur, so the German regulator for energy, amongst other things, where she heads up their international relations office. And she also sits on the board of ACER. Annegret, over to you.
Thank you, Sonja, and welcome to everyone. It's kind of an unusual feeling, indeed, to be in the room again with a lot of people here, and a good feeling, I have to say. So it's funny, yes, yes. And my real job, indeed, is in, let's say, the job for which I'm paid, is at BNetzA. But equally, I'm very happy and proud to be CER president and to work here for all the European consumers. And I think we are really at a moment where we have a topical topic here: energy price spikes and the green transition. And I think how to empower the consumer. This is also the headline of our strategy: empowering the consumers for the energy transition. And I think we have to now, of course, take into account the price spikes in energy. But I think we also should not forget about the energy transition, the midterm, long-term vision that we have here to come to net zero by 2050, and to see how we can make this happen and work together. So we see that there was first a sort of supply side check, a demand side check with during the pandemic, and then a kind of double supply side shock. First with the economy starting earlier in other countries, other continents than Europe, and now of course we have the invasion of Russia in the Ukraine and all the consequences that this has all the havoc also that this plays on the energy markets. And as you say, we now have to look at these markets and in particular on how to cushion the impacts this may have, in particular for vulnerable consumer groups and also, of course, for low-income consumer groups, without, as I said, however, forgetting or losing out of sight the longer-term picture, and that is mainly to make the energy transition happen. And that, as we say, as we know, requires that consumers become more active. So I think what is key right now is to make sure that consumers are moved and can go through these difficult times without being so shocked or shied away from their part that we consider that it's necessary for the for them to benefit from the energy transition, but also to contribute to the energy transition. In other words, demand side flexibility and dynamic contracts, etc. So I think that is some form of balance that we have now to make sure that this is not destroyed, this balance, and that we somehow manage to get through this interim period, which of course is hard. And of course, this also shows a little bit the risks of these changes and of the required behavior changes, where we say it is important that we take consumers with us, but that at the same time they are continue to be protected also in the new brave world, and that we are not forgetting about customer rights, consumer rights, and consumer protection in particular, but that on the other side, as I said, we are also not being stuck here, but open and ensure consumers that it is worthwhile moving ahead and become a more active part of the energy transition of energy markets. Of course, we now also analyze the impacts this has on the markets and the way the markets function, but I think we also should not forget that at the heart of the clean energy package and in general of liberalized markets, we have well-functioning markets. So we need to see in which way we can ensure also in extreme situations a well-functioning market for the benefit of all market participants, not least for consumers. So that is something that we want to ensure and to work on, so that they are not seeing only the negative side here now of dynamic prices, but that they know regulators are there to ensure that markets are well functioning, that they are empowered, and that they are protected in this also in a changing energy system, in an energy system which needs to become more flexible and more flexible. And with this, I also want to say a final word. There is, of course, also the aspect that we see now that everyone is trying to look at how can we change the energy mix, how can we move faster away from fossil fuels into renewable fuels, in renewable energy sources. And that is, of course, a very important part of the equation. But the other part that is important is also that energy efficiency and the energy efficiency first principle becomes more important, because the cheapest energy is always the energy that is not spent or that is saved. Yeah, and that is something that where we also need to provide support for consumers to be able to make use of energy efficiency behavior and measures, so that they, for example, are in a position that they can buy equipment that is necessary to profit from more energy efficient technologies. Yeah, so this is something that plays together, and therefore I would like to close with saying we need to have well-functioning markets based and accompanied by consumer empowerment and consumer protection, and last but not least, looking at ways to embed this in pushing energy efficiency technologies and the use of these energy efficiency technologies as far as they are already available. So there is a transition, and of course a transition always requires adaptation of behavior and of patterns. So for all of us, I think this is a challenge, but I think it is in the end worthwhile, and without this we would not be able finally to reach the climate neutrality. So I would really say that it is important that we go through the climate, through the crisis that we have now, but with a view to not lose out of sight the energy transition, because in the end this is then also an aspect for the future, for more energy security overall in the game. So it's not a way to play one against the other, and I think that is my message here as well, but to make sure that they go hand in hand without losing the consumer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think I hadn't really thought of it like that, but it's true. It's an unprecedented opportunity to engage people in one sense. No one's been as aware of energy and their energy bills as before as now. And at the same time, things like dynamic pricing, which we need indeed for demand response, are suddenly risk being portrayed and seen as something extremely negative. So that's, very, very good point, I think, you make. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. A little round of applause for Annegret, those who are here. And let's move on then to our first panel discussion, our first debate. So I say first debate, but we have, of course, got a series of presentations to kick off that debate. This first session, we've called it A Fair Transition, Digitalization, New Business Models, and Decarbonization. And the idea is to talk a little bit about, well, the two big trends we often hear about are digitalization and decarbonization, and how all things digital, and that's including online tools, new, slightly different business models, smart meters, how all of these things come together and ultimately are trends and tools that consumers can turn to and make the most of, and can help them in their energy use and supplies. So what we wanted to, we've got 4 speakers basically in this first session. I'll just tell you who they are, and then I'll give them each a slightly longer introduction as they take the floor, because you'll never remember who everyone is otherwise. So we've got Mark van Stiphout here from DG Energy at the European Commission. We've got Simona Aquinero, CEO and co-founder of FlexiDAO. He's going to be talking about new business models. We've got Stefan Arendt here from representing the Council of European Energy Regulators. And finally, we've got David Zenner here from Elia, the Belgian transmission system operator. So we wanted to kick off, as is often customary in Brussels, with the European Commission, and therefore I wanted to hand over to Mark first. Mark is Deputy Head of Unit at DG Energy, and his unit is responsible for research, innovation, competitiveness, and digitalization. Many of you might remember him from his days in the cabinet of Energy Commissioner Günther Oettinger up until 2014. And prior to that, he had a longer history in energy, also assisting the Director General for Energy, amongst others. So Mark, looking forward to hearing from you, and in particular also understand a new digitalization of energy action plan that is in the works at the Commission.
Great. Thank you very much, Sonia. How much time do I have, just to be
You've got 10 minutes.
Clear? Okay. All right. Good. Then let me try and use these 10 minutes wisely. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Sorry not to be there in person, and Corona is not really that much of an excuse anymore, but now it is more getting used to the fact that sometimes you actually have to go somewhere and take that into account. But I'm at least already very happy to see that the things are gradually moving back to also having real meetings and real discussions, because I think we all realized over the last 2 years that sometimes it's more effective to do teleworking or to have video conferences, but it doesn't replace the real deal of actually meeting people in person. So I hope next time I can be there. Indeed, as Sonia said, I would like to talk a little bit about digitalization. In our unit, we do quite a lot of things. Traditionally, we've been working very much on Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. Since the reorganization within the DG last year, we are responsible for digitalization, and we have been asked to develop a digitalization of energy action plan as a means to set out concrete steps how we can make this twin transition that is often talked about, namely the digital and the green transition that our economy is going through, how we can benefit from, or how we can steer this transition in support of the energy policy objectives. And there are, in short, 5 elements to this digitalization of energy action plan, and I would like to zoom in on 2 of them. So very briefly, these 5 are promoting data exchange in the energy sector. Secondly, making sure that this is for the consumers and the citizens' benefit and interest and a possibility to engage citizens. Thirdly, promote investments in digital technologies in the energy sector. Fourth, making sure that while we do all these good things, so to say, where digitalization can help, we also look at the challenges, in particular, the vulnerability that may increase if we don't address cybersecurity well. And the last point is the energy consumption of the IT sector itself, which is, of course, also increasing big time in data centers, discussions on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and these kind of things. And we, of course, want to make sure that the benefits of digitalization weigh up to the increased energy consumption, and that also the energy consumption of the IT is used as a driver for renewables and a driver for energy efficiency investments, not just within the data centers themselves, but across the value chain, and also doing something useful with waste heat, for example. And so avoiding that we put all of them above the pole circle, but put them in places where the heat can actually be used for a purpose. But the 2 points I would like to focus on today are data exchange and how do we make sure that digitalization helps the consumers and engages the citizens. Because, of course, this is very important also in the light of the conference today. And I'm very happy that CEER is dedicating a panel with such experts to this topic. So first of all, on data exchange. When we started looking at what are the key issues for digitalization, we of course didn't start from scratch. We know that there are already many colleagues in RDG or in the Commission or in the energy world full stop, and some of the panelists are here with me, are looking at how does digitalization help the energy transition. And we look at different places where we have policy objectives, where data exchange and smooth data exchange is really necessary to make these policy objectives work. So we start from the analysis of where are the key policy priorities that require smooth and cheap and simple data exchange for these policy priorities to be realized. And our conclusion so far, based on our analysis, but also discussions in workshops that we organized over the past weeks, end of February, beginning of March, is that there are basically 3 key priorities where we need data exchange to start with. I don't think this is an exhaustive list, but these are the ones we want to start with. And the first one is for demand response and flexibility markets. I think Anna-Grete also already addressed this quite a bit. And so if we want to integrate renewables, if we want to make sure that we do this in an energy efficient way, then we need network operators to valorize flexibility for balancing, for congestion management from a lot of distributed resources that they don't own. And that requires some form of data communication, because let's say the simplest data communication, which I don't think anybody of us thinks is the solution, is calling everybody who has a flexible appliance in his house and telling him to shut it off or turn it on. But that's not really intelligent communication. All these things need to be automatic if they really want to work. And so this is a matter of making sure that we have easy data exchange between network operators, aggregators, and appliances or assets in a house or in the street, have it considers electric cars or these kind of things. So this making the demand for data exchange will come from things like the work on flexibility markets, and our colleagues are working on a network code, or preparing a network code together with ACER, CER, and the stakeholders, as you probably know. But we think that making sure that the data exchange is covered is not automatic. The same, so first of all, flexibility markets. Secondly, closely linked but slightly different is smart charging of electric vehicles. Of course, this is in a way a type of demand response, but it's also linked to mobility services. It's linked to, let's say, cars moving around. So that we think that electric vehicles are a bit of a separate type of animal that we need to take into account and address separately, while doing this in consistency with general flexibility markets data exchange. And thirdly, if we talk about distributed assets, of course, many of them are in buildings. They contribute to making buildings smarter, to making buildings more efficient, but also generate a lot of data that can help investments in renovations. So these are the three that we want to prioritize: demand response and flexibility markets, smart charging of electric vehicles, and smart buildings and renovations. And what we are looking at is how can we set up a data exchange governance that makes this easy. We have principles on how this should, let's say, what the rights are in some of the legal proposals that have come out recently. For example, in the Fit for 55 proposal for renewables, where we talk about access to car data or electric vehicle data. We have the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, where we talk about access to data from the building. And we recently had the Data Act that is prepared by our colleagues in DG Connect, which is really looking across the board at the right for consumers that if they own a device, a data generating device, that a consumer can say, I would like the data that are generated by this device or appliance to be shared with a third party. So these are principles that come back in different places. And we think that this principle is key. And we hope that this will go through the Council and the Parliament, obviously. It's already there for smart meters. The principle is the same, but it's focused on smart meters in the Electricity Directive. And but what we also see from the smart meter data exchange obligations is that we cannot then assume that this will be settled automatically. This is typically a coordination issue where we have many-to-many data exchange that needs to work. So we want to set up a governance structure where we bring the different parties together to say, solve this data exchange challenge, agree on what type of formats, what type of contracts, what type of liabilities, those kind of things need to be organized. And some of them will be common building blocks, some of them will be very specific for individual use cases. And so we want to make sure on the one hand that there's consistency between these different types of data exchange, because we also believe that once these data starts being shared, innovation can come, new services can come. And so building this in from the beginning is very important. And as I said, we think there's a lot of good work already. We have companies like Simona's who has plenty of ideas of what to do with all this data, and we have companies like Elia who are already looking at what type of data can we make available and how can that also help us managing the system of the future. So there are a lot of different things happening, and what we want to make sure is that, of course, the ones that are moving fast can continue to move fast, but that we also bring everybody along, and that companies and countries learn from each other. Because, of course, there needs to be things organized at a national level and also things organized at a European level to make sure that we do this in an internal market for electricity and for data. And so making sure that we do this in a way that is for the benefit of the consumers. On the one hand, starting from this principle that is the consumer that says, I would like my data to be shared with somebody else because I think that is really the starting point of everything. But we want to make that aggregation and the fact that when the consumer says, I would like my data to be shared, that is made easy. And that is a matter that can be very complicated on the business and the back office side, but for the consumer, it needs to be easy. And for the aggregator or for the supplier, it needs to be easy to gather information or data from different sources or appliances without having to send in an installer that goes there for a day. Because the more expensive we make these solutions, the more we need to look for other more, let's say, in principle, more expensive solutions like putting batteries dedicated for congestion management in the grid or investing in more copper. So this is really a matter of keeping the prices of the energy transition under control. And so just to wrap up, this is, of course, assuming that there are data. So it depends also on having very intelligent grids. And there are some grids that are more intelligent than others in Europe, but pushing for investments in smart grids is one of the key issues. Secondly, if we talk about what we're discussing now in the European Council, of course, the war that is happening at our borders is terrible, and it just means that we need to speed up with these things faster. The fact that, let's say, the gas-fired power plants, and a few of them set the prices and create very high prices, we don't think that there's a need to change anything about marginal pricing, but what digitalization and flexibility markets and smart charging can offer is that they turn energy supply into an energy service. And so we don't necessarily want to expose any consumer to the, I'm wrapping up, any consumer to the volatility of the market, but we want to make sure that an energy company can translate a volatile price into a fixed energy service contract. So I think that's also linked to what is happening at the moment. And this is my end of my presentation. Sorry for being a bit too long.
It's okay. Can you hear me? Because it sounds to me like the mic wasn't on. But can you hear me?
Now I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can hear me.
And before. I saw you kind of waving.
Okay. So you can see me too. Okay, that's even better. Okay, I'll make sure I motion then. That's probably even easier. Okay, thank you. Lots to digest there. I guess the first question that came to my mind, but we'll save questions. This is just a reminder to everyone watching. Do send in questions as they occur to you, and we'll get to them in the Q&A. But one of the things I wondered is, what if consumers don't want to share their data? Because you're talking about all of this is for, assuming people are happy to, feed their information. So think on that one. We won't take it right away, but that's one of the things that occurred to me. What if they don't even want to, or they don't think of doing so? Right, let's move to our second speaker then, Simona Aquinero. He was already briefly introduced by Mark, CEO and co-founder of FlexiDAO. So Simona is a clean tech entrepreneur, an energy management consultant, and a research engineer. So plenty of things. And FlexiDAO is a company that he's co-founded. It's a software provider, I understand, and basically an organization that's going to enable you to have carbon-free energy 24/7. So it's not just about having a certain share of renewables in your energy mix over the course of a year, but you can actually say to your, I suppose, customers, this is green power every second or every hour, every minute of every day. So yeah, he's here to tell us about new business models very appropriately. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction and for inviting me to the event. Very happy, very excited to be here. Yeah, maybe just I would like to start linking back to a few points that were shared by previous speakers, starting from Mark. That indeed, as a company, we use the common energy data spaces. We actually one of the beneficiaries and users, and that is fundamental for to actually operate our business. So here we are an evidence that it's already happening. And of course, we work with enterprises, but most of our clients actually use all the data exchanges that Mark just explained in order to enable us offer services to them. So I think this was just a remark that I like to say, also because then it links to another point that Mark raised on the energy consumption of IT. of data centers and big IT companies, which are actually the majority of our clients, because as FlexiDAO, we work with Google, Microsoft, Iron Mountain, helping them indeed make sure that the electricity consumption of their data centers is green every hour of the day, every day of the year. It is, of course, a massive undertaking because the grid is not decarbonized every hour of the day, every day of the year. Otherwise, transition done, we wouldn't even need to have this kind of discussion. But so this is to frame what we do at FlexiDAO. So we work with large enterprises. Our business model is a new business model that until 2 years ago, there was no need, there was no discussion of being green every hour of the day. But now, especially now, and this links to the point that was raised by the very first speaker, we see that finally the energy topic is really becoming at the center of everybody's discourse and everybody's discussion, and that even as the grid gets decarbonized, more and more people are becoming acutely aware that there are still times in which it doesn't matter how much solar we deploy, that in which we run on gas. And we have to solve this. We have to solve this because we want to be decarbonized every hour of the day. And I'm saying all of this because finally it's easier for us as a company, even though this is very recent news, to have the kind of discussion that I'm going to discuss today. And in particular, the point that I will be touching is, first of all, what does it actually mean to consume renewable energy for a company, but also for consumers? And how does consuming renewable energy relate to carbon emissions? So if I am buying renewable energy, what are my emissions? And this is very important because, of course, it's impossible to track electrons. Like, it's physically impossible. You cannot say that electron that comes out of your socket is green or gray. That's like the physics doesn't allow that. You get what you get based on where you are. However, then every consumer and every company is entitled or can buy a green tariff. So what are you actually buying then, and what impact it has on your carbon footprint? And then what kind of business models can be unlocked based on this discussion, so the topic of today. So historically, and the way it works today in Europe is that when you buy renewable energy, actually what you're buying are certificates. You're buying guarantees of origin. Guarantees of origin essentially tells you that where you are, you have CO2 emissions and you get whatever electricity that you're getting based on the location where you are. So if you are in Poland, most likely you're getting a very heavy in fossil fuel. If you are in Norway, most likely you're getting almost 100% renewable. But on top of that, as consumer, you can make a choice. And the choice is to buy guarantees of origin through your supplier or not, depending on the size of and the type of consumer that you are, and therefore support renewable energy deployment. This has worked very, very well and has enabled the deployment and implementation of a lot of gigawatt hour of capacity in Europe, and the European market is the best and biggest functioning market when it comes to green certificates. So there's a lot of success that was achieved through this. At the same time, we as FlexiDAO, together with many others, we're also advocating for more change, because we think that we are at a point in which just deploying more solar or more wind will not solve the short-term needs and problems that we have. We need to make sure that also there is storage available, that there are carbon-free technologies that can run on a base load and that can be a little bit more predictable. We need to create the right business models to give the right price signals to markets to actually care to deploy this kind of solutions. And in essence, this is all what 24/7 carbon-free energy is about. Recognizing that how today renewable energy is bought and accounted for is great, but it is limited in terms of link to the actual physical reality of the grid and the actual physical carbon emissions that come out of it. Today, companies essentially, they need to match companies and suppliers that sell renewable energy to consumers. It's actually the same. They need to match the aggregate consumption over a year in all locations that they have, and buy the same amount of guarantees of origin over the year. And with that, they can be 100% renewable, and they can claim to be zero carbon emissions. In fact, this is not true. You're not zero carbon emissions. If you operate in Poland or if you operate at night, you are not consuming renewable energy most of the times. That's just a fact. The market allows you to do that. But by doing that, has created, as I said, many benefits. We are bringing a lot of new renewable energy online, but we are not recognizing that solar is fluctuates, is volatile, wind fluctuates and is volatile. And there we need to give price signals to the market that it cannot be as easy and as cheap to be green at night or to be green at midday. Because there's no enough supply for everybody to be green at night. So 24/7 is about recognizing this and about pushing for new models, new business models, but also regulatory models that allow and force, in a way, consumer to count and measure their carbon emissions on an hourly basis. So every hour, where does my energy come from? Is the energy that I'm is my supplier producing energy in the hour when I consume it, or they are just buying a guarantee of origin from the previous month, 3 months before, from another country? So this is essentially what we want to do. And this is enabling a lot of different business models. It's generally called the kind of next generation procurement. Now there are a lot of innovative and players like Google, Microsoft, Iron Mountain, but also the United States federal government has recently released a request for proposal to buy 50% of the yearly volume of energy consumed on a 24/7 basis. Iceland, the country of Iceland, is also joined an initiative from the United Nations on 24/7 carbon-free energy. So there's really a big movement coming up that is recognizing that procurement of renewable energy and how is disclosed towards the consumer needs to be more transparent and needs to be more linked to the actual carbon avoidance that it generates. So procurement of renewable energy and how we look at renewable energy should shift from just like whatever you buy is good because we don't have enough to, okay, but buy thinking of the carbon impact that you are actually having. So the next generation of procurement is any procurement that prioritizes impact to drive decarbonization at all times and all places. And this can mainly take form in two different ways. There's one way in which you want to make sure that the electricity flows to you. This is like, for example, very important for the RFNBOs, the big discussion on the Delegated Act. I don't know to what extent the audience is familiar, but like how you consider hydrogen from electrolysis renewable. You need to prove that in the same bidding zone, in the same area where the electrolyzer is located, every hour that the electrolyzer consumes electricity, it needs to be matched to a production. That was the proposal of the Commission in the Delegated Act. This is making sure, like trying to create a system that brings the physical reality closer to the accounting reality. And this works very well, for example, for renewable, for any kind of electrification approach, or for companies that really want to have renewable energy, want to be able to say, this is flowing to me. The other business model is unlocking. There are many other companies that say, I don't really care if the electricity can flow to me because I want to buy electricity wherever I have the biggest impact. So if I'm in Norway, I don't want to buy electricity from Norway. I want to buy renewable electricity from Poland, because that's where I have the biggest impact. That's when I can foster more capacity to come online, and that's where it's most needed. And transitioning from a system and a market that counts electricity and CO2 emissions on an yearly basis into a market that does it on an hourly basis at the very least, because actually our markets work on a 15-minute basis most of the times, that requires a lot of digitalization, a lot of data, a lot of regulatory changes, and brings back everything that was said before by Mark, bring it together with what we do as a company, coming up with new business models, and then hopefully also changes in policy, where we're already having discussion with different policymakers through a big organization called Energy Tag, where hopefully guarantees of origin will be more granular in the coming future and not have a granularity of 1 month. We need guarantees of origin to be at least 1 hour. So there's a lot of changes, a lot of business models, but everything is about being more transparent to the consumer and knowing what actually happens when you buy a green tariff. Fortunately, we live in an era where consumers judge where they buy and to whom they buy, also based on how sustainable they are. And today, unfortunately, it's very easy or too easy for many companies to claim they are zero emissions with very easy and cheap actions. And that we think is misleading for the consumer and does not provide the right price signals to the market. And we have the opportunity through digitalization, new business models, and policy changes to amend that. And we think that with 24/7 carbon-free energy and all the great work that's being done at the UN, at Resource, Euroelectric, etc., we have the means to make it happen and can foster innovation, can foster new business models, better market designs, and more importantly, a more rapid and cost-efficient deployment of renewable energy, not only in Europe, but hopefully also in developing countries where it's more needed. I'm done.
Great.
10 minutes, 11.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, very complimentary to Mark's as well. And interesting to hear that the whole concept of 24/7 green energy is, which I've heard about, but in rather isolated, I suppose, examples or initiatives, is something that is becoming more widespread and is not gathering momentum, not just in Europe, but you mentioned also in the US. So it's a concept it's emerging globally, as you say, and the next generation procurement, and I guess the next generation of energy transition too, where we're moving beyond, as you said, trying to just deploy renewables wherever and just trying to grow that share to being much more precise in where those renewables are, what they're displacing, and if you're a consumer, exactly what you're consuming when and exactly what that means in terms of your carbon footprint. And yeah, a nice link back to digitalization as a means to enable all of that and enable the transparency that's ultimately needed for something like that to work and to have merit, I suppose, if you're, ultimately you're doing it because your customers appreciate and are prepared to pay for it in some way. So thank you very much for that. Once again, a reminder to send in questions if you have them. Let's move on then to our third speaker, Stefan Arendt. Nice to see you here. Who's here representing CEER. He's an economist, previously worked at the IFO Institute before joining also the German energy regulator, the Bundesnetzagentur. And his focus here at CEER is on consumer issues and retail markets, and he co-chairs CEER's Consumer Empowerment Workstream. So looking forward to hear what you have been up to here in terms of empowering consumers.
Okay, thank you for the briefly introduction, and also it's a pleasure to me to participating this year on in the CEER Customer Conference in person. So it's a long time ago, but I I really enjoy this opportunity. And today, as it was said, I'm here to represent CEER positions on the consumer empowerment in the energy transition, as this panel was introduced by the Commission. So we have a kind of political perspective. We have now also heard some business experience in the field of digitalization and energy transition. And yeah, my burden now is to give you an idea of the regulatory work, on the ongoing work in this field of area. And indeed, when I prepared my presentation today, I tried to find a very good solution to give you a feeling why this is very important from the point of view of the regulators to keep focus on the consumer. As you all are aware, the consumer are the main drivers. At the end of the day, we are all energy consumers, and we all are, or it's necessary to enable energy consumers to actively participating in the energy transition. So in CR, we always like to use this kind of picture to describe the challenges of how to proceed with a energy transition, how to imagine, to give a picture to the energy transition. And when I prepared this presentation, I somehow realized that my personal experience, my personal development as energy consumers very well fits with the steps we did in Europe in the last 20 years almost with the energy packages and the developments. And therefore, I want to give you a kind of anecdotal review of my development because it very well figures out why it's important to give the opportunity to the consumer to have a proper information to enable them to be actively participating in the energy market. So maybe it's easy for you to go back 25 years ago, talking about the late 1990s. My personal CV, I leaving my parental home in this time for studying economics in the nice city of Dresden. So you can visit at all, a very nice place to be. And it was the first time I faced with the challenges of finding a own landlord, signing a flat contract, and of course signing my first supplier contract. And for me, for my 20-year-old myself, it was at this time indeed quite easy because there almost was no really an opportunity to choose. We have in Germany a kind of system, the municipality-owned companies in these times. They get you an offer, maybe 2 different offers you can choose, but it was for me, in my very first signing a contract, it was quite easy and quite comfortable. And I don't ask any question, I signed and I paid a bill, I was able to do so. But I learned into my studies from an economic point of view, this is not really a competitive market. That's no choice. That's simply take it and eat it or leave it. And so we can jump 5 years. 5 years later, I'm finishing my studies, searching for the very first job, signing or searching for a larger flat and signing my second energy contract. And at this times, indeed, it was almost the time of the second energy package. Indeed, there were different suppliers available in Dresden. So I got the opportunity to choose a supplier, but indeed it was not that comfortable. And I did my best in these days. I'm searching for different contractors, comparing the offers, but it was not that comfortable as it is today. So at the end of the day, as a consumer, I made it very easy. I choose the same supplier I had before. So the supplier is happy, but again, this is not the idea of a competitive energy market. So we can jump again almost 5 years later, maybe some more. I changed my job. I hired at the Federal Network Agency. And this very well fits with the implementation of the third energy packet in Germany. So talking about 2010, 2011. So in this time, the situation significantly changed from me as an energy consumer. It was the first time when I moved to another location where I was really enabled to actively choose and compare different offers. So it was the time the first comparison tools in Germany were implemented, and the regulatory and legal framework allows me as a consumer very easily to compare and to switch and to choose actively a supplier. And it was the first time I actively do so. I did not choose the supplier or the main supplier in the area, so the supplier owned by the municipality. I chose a green new market entrance supplier. And the years later on, I was somehow a kind of active consumer. I almost switched my supplier annually. It is also because of the business model of those suppliers. Usually they offer you a very cheap entrance contract, and after 1 year they somehow stepwise increase the price. So you have to be in those days, you have to be as a consumer very, very aware of the contracts you're signing to avoid bad wake up after 1 year when the price may increase dramatically. So, but it is a good example, and in these times also CER really actively starts their guidance on empowering consumer in the digital market. For instance, in 2012, CER published their first guidelines of good practice on comparison tools. So they start the work in 2010 around. So with the implementation of the energy package, and give a very first and good guidance on how comparison tools as a simple and proper tool for consumer should be organized, should be implemented to give the consumer the best opportunities from these, in these days, new technology. And then we can make another jump to the latest developments almost. So it's very well fit in the 2050, 2060. I got the opportunity to get my first own property, so I buy my own castle. But indeed, it's also very well fit with a discussion and development of the energy market, because in these days I was not only confronted with finding a simple energy contract of electricity. It was the first time I have to sign a gas contract. It was the first time I have to decide, okay, what is about a PV rooftop installation? Should I buy a normal car or maybe switching to electric vehicle? So the complexity, and that's very important on this picture, the complexity for me as a consumer dramatically increased over the last couple of years. My wife is very active in the field of renewable, and she always focuses also on, we have to find a green contract, not only in electricity, also in gas, how we can push the green development. And these questions made it much more complicated for me as a consumer to answer, only to compare by a comparison tool on these days. Of course, the tools developed furthermore, but it was not the simple as it was the years before to find an offer matching all the things on my personal need. And that's very crucial, because of course my personal needs are not your personal needs. If you live in a flat, you have other needs than the person in a house. And to cover this, to create a framework which enables all kinds of consumer to actively participating in the energy market is quite a challenge also for the regulators, and we're still ongoing on this. So the CER updated their guidelines of good practice on comparison tools in 2017, and we are ongoing. We did a second update which is ongoing. We had a public consultation at the beginning of this year, and in this we as regulatory authorities focusing on these future-proof questions. We have to solve or find answers on how a digital tool can enable the consumer, also by provision of additional information on the source of their energy, on new services, on aggregation. So everything consumer are concerned should be part of the regulatory and legal framework. And this is the challenge. We are still ongoing with this challenge, and we actively asking for participating you as consumers, as stakeholders, to help us to create a proper framework for the consumers to actively participating, to be able to actively participating in the energy transition, and do not be like these little cartoons. I like this to support my presentation. So this should imagine, it used the picture of cookies, but it's almost the same for energy services. So as a consumer, or as regulators and legislators, we have to ensure that the consumer has no information overload. The choose and the ability for consumers is crucial, that they actively participating in the energy market. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a round of applause is allowed. Thank you very much, and for the very nice narrative. And I thought you came to a very strong conclusion. It's true, we perhaps don't stop to think. We assume comparison tools, they're there, they should be easy to use. You type in, you know, your information and it spits out an answer. But it's true that as things have gotten more complex and every individual's, I guess, mix of needs is different, how do you develop a digital tool, which should be possible if we're thinking we can track, you know, green power 24/7. You think it should be possible with all the computing power and algorithms to have a tool which is personalized to the extent that it can cater to all your individual needs and wishes and still tell you which offer you should be going for. Indeed. Affordable, green, etc., whatever else you may want. So thank you very much. And yes, so interesting too to hear that you are conducting a review at the moment of comparison tools, your guidance on those. So keep an eye out. When is that due to be finished?
Indeed, in May. Hopefully.
In May. Okay. Okay. So keep an eye out for that. And that brings us to our final speaker in this first part. I'd like to welcome David Zenner here from Elia, the Belgian TSO, and he's been with the company for almost 20 years. He heads up customers for them, so perfectly placed to speak here today. And that includes lots of things, but amongst others also the creation of energy as a service business models. He previously worked on grid operations and maintenance. He's originally an electromechanical engineer, but very interested to hear your insights from the TSO perspective on customers and what you do to look after households.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. Great pleasure to be here and to be able to talk a little bit about how we look at customers, how we look at consumers. I think this is quite familiar. We, as a TSO, are ahead of some great challenges. We even call them opportunities even. So we have to integrate even more renewables if we want to go for the decarbonization goals. We will need to decarbonize our consumption as well, and a lot of new appliances will pop up in the system in the few upcoming years. So it is becoming very urgent for us as a TSO responsible to guarantee actually the balancing, that all those aspects are matched to each other. And I have a small graph that can illustrate this a little bit for the Belgium system. You will see that on the top slide we plotted the situation of the Belgium system in February this year, where you see what is the production in dark green on offshore wind, and light green on onshore wind, and in yellow on solar, which this will look like if we put ourselves in February 2028. And that's a little bit the situation we will face, and that we will be sure that we can guarantee the balancing. You see that more volatility will come into the system, and that's our purpose, of course, and that's why we are looking at more flexibility, of course. And flexibility that will come with the electrification and the electrification of our demand, which will give, of course, great opportunities. But it's not only about managing the system, of course, it's also about an evolution that is needed in order to have a more active participation of the consumers, end consumers, industrial consumers, all consumers to the system. So we believe actually that we should shift a little bit and make the market design evolve to a market design which is more taking care of the real participation of the end consumers. Moving actually from a system where today suppliers and balancing responsible parties, as we call them in our language, have a very key role to a system where the consumer is more empowered, and where demand actually is becoming more intelligent due to digitalization, of course, and will be able to follow the generation. As intermittence will come into the system, that it will, of course, we will of course need to have some smarter demand, and the electrification and the digitalization will allow that. I will give the opportunity that demand actually reacts to what is produced at that moment. And this will allow also some innovative solutions and services for the end consumers. Today, for example, in the Belgium system, you're not able to charge your car with your solar panels if the car is not physically located at your solar panels. This seems to us something that needs to be changed if you want to really unlock innovative solutions for the end consumers. We've heard already that it is some innovative startups are looking at how to track electricity. Well, there also we need to find some solutions that makes it more easy to do so. If you go, for example, at Friends for a barbecue, then you should be able to charge your car and immediately have this on your electricity bill, for example, and not have to pay your friends for the charging of the car. So a lot of elements that we see that are actually today in our sector not possible or very hard to be facilitated for the moment. And therefore, we really believe that some evolutions to the market design are really needed. And what are the key evolutions that we see up front for us? Well, we think there are two main elements that we should bring into the market design. And the first thing is actually being able to move from competition before the meter to competition behind the meter. Make it possible that appliances can be allocated with different suppliers, for example, or that you'll be able to enter into a peer-to-peer exchange with your neighbor or your friends. I mean, we as a TSO, we don't have to decide what kind of service you need to enter into, but at least we should make it possible. We should be possible that, for example, your house stays with the main supplier, but you have a choice as a consumer to enter in some additional services or contracts behind the meter. For example, take the example as here on the slide that you can see is that you, for example, are able to take a second supplier for your electricity car, exchange your solar panels with your neighbors or with a good association, whatever you want to do. This should be facilitated and this should be built up. And therefore, I think we as a system operators, we need to develop some very lean and small infrastructure that enables you to exchange those blocks of energy, as we call it, with third parties without not having us entering into those commercial contracts. Be assured on that. We wouldn't be able to do so, but at least facilitate those exchanges for the end consumers. And this will allow actually to have better service, one thing, but what is of our interest is, of course, that flexibility that comes with those, with the car, that comes with your heat pump, that comes with your solar panels, actually can be shifted and can be shifted to moments where there is abundance of energy. That, for example, you charge your car when there's abundance of energy. And that's also something we want to facilitate, is that we are not only looking at those balancing markets, that flexibility markets, but actually that we take it a little way broader than that, that we allow consumers to valorize the flexibility on those different markets. Not only on the last market, which is mainly the smallest market, but go for also the day ahead, intraday markets, which will need that flexibility as well. Allowing that thing is one element, but it is not enough. We need also to have the right price for the electricity. And so we need to move to a more real-time price, as we call it, a price that is really reflecting the true value of the energy as it is consumed. And we really believe that day-ahead markets will move more and more to future markets, and that the right price signal should be given in the real-time markets, which allow market parties to react on that, to shift that flexibility again to the most opportune moment. And to do so, we need also to work on that price signal. We really believe that we should move to a quite implicit system where with a price signal, with the correct price signal, we steer actually, or the market parties steer actually the flexibility, which will of course allow us as a TSO then to manage the system and be able to guarantee that the lights still stay on. I really believe also that this will need to come with the proper measures. I mean, our pledge is not to expose the consumer to real-time prices at any case. So you need to put also consumer protection into this. And I know you may be thinking now of the Texan situations. Of course, this is something that should be applicable to the assets that have the flexibility in them, and not maybe on some basic services. So that are really the two main elements of our design, and it's not also not a big bang. You can, of course, stay in your current situation if you would like so. But what we want to do is actually bring that price signal, bring that opportunity to the appliance level, a little bit comparable with what has happened in the financial markets, for example. You can also act as a day trader if you want. If it's a good idea, I'll leave it in the middle, but at least you have that possibility, which then again creates a lot of innovative solutions and services that are coming with market parties, professionals that can offer that service. And you could just stay with your main supplier, entering into packages like we see also in the telecom sector, for example. But at least that possibility will create more innovative solutions, to our opinion. And from a TSO, why is this so important? Because that will generate flexibility that we will see coming to the markets. And our opinion is always, as long as markets solve the system and the situation, that's way better than when the TSO has to intervene at the end. So consumer market design, it is about the consumer winning twice. It is about having better services for the end consumer, being able to enter into innovative solutions, being able also with the exchange of energy blocks to track his energy, making sure that it is green as it is on a granular level from our appliances, giving him more possibilities to react, to be able to manage his flexibility and to have better prices. But it is also about having a more efficient system, being able to not entering into a massive reservation of balancing reserves, for example, but keeping that under control. And that's why we believe that the consumer wins twice. To conclude, I just want to say that it is not only about the market design. I think Mark referred to as well. We believe that there are some more elements, and data and access to real-time data is of course key. Consumers should at any time be able to have their data at their disposal. It is their property, let's be very clear on that, and they should be able to share it with any party they like to share. If they don't like to share, then they are not obliged to do, but at least that should be key. The consumer in the center is also about data. And it's not about one market party or one TSO that will be able to realize all of this. We believe that we need to put up ecosystems where we bring all those market actors together in order to develop the energy services of tomorrow. So to conclude, 3 major building blocks that need to be tackled in order to put the consumer at the center of the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you very much for that. I think another very interesting presentation and very clear as well, very clear recommendation. So basically, I understand why TSOs are looking for flexibility. I mean, that's keeping the system balanced. So you're looking for things like competition behind the meter to create more opportunities for flexibility, and effectively for that flexibility to be more flexible, so that you can, for example, as you say, you can be somewhere else and be using your solar panels to charge your car, or someone else could be using yours. So more flexibility, and it's more flexible and usable in different markets and in different ways to what's possible nowadays. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Let's move to the Q&A then. Okay, thank you to those who have sent in questions. We've had a couple, so we'll take about 10 minutes or so. We'll go into a little bit into the coffee break to take some of them. And there was one that came in, probably the first one that came in, and I think it's Simona who's probably best placed to answer, although feel free to correct me if anyone disagrees. And the question was, can digital technologies facilitate the large-scale rollout of battery electric vehicles and help integrate them into the market?
I mean, I guess that without it would not be possible. That would be the most straight answer. What we focus on is creating new business models to create positive business case for storage. So what we want is that if I am a large enterprise like Google, today I look at the cheapest option, and most likely it's, for example, a solar PPA that I can buy. And this covers me on an annual balance, covers my annual consumption, but maybe if we create different incentives, then I don't buy the cheapest option, which is solar, but I buy solar plus storage. And now through this PPA, I gave the incentives to supplier to deploy a storage asset that would otherwise not be deployed. So that's what we focus on. I think that then how that storage can be integrated with data exchanges, digital infrastructure interfaces, that falls more on the great work of the TSOs and on the policymakers.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can comment on this next question too. I guess that's one for you, and the one I originally put to Mark. So there's often, I guess it's two questions. There's often an assumption there is a willingness to engage with the energy market. So in your experience, is that indeed the case? And then the question I thought of when Mark was speaking initially, more specifically, are you aware, is there in general, on the other side, a lot of concern or hesitation about people giving away their data? Ultimately, that could help them by making, I guess, comparison tools work better, for example. But what's your experience of that? So an actual willingness to engage and potential concerns around that?
Yeah, well, in all transparency, we have the majority of our experience with large enterprises. So of course, like when it comes to B2C and smaller clients, we have less experience. We have done some renewable energy community projects when we do the tracking and the matching. So our experience is always when the value for the service is clear, we're happy, like usually consumers are happy to give away the data. I mean, that's what we do, most of us do every day with social media, and we are not even aware in most of the cases. If they're well informed and they understand the value, because that improves their life or decreases their cost, I don't see why not. In our experience, it's always been the case, both in large enterprises, which is the majority of our experience, but also for the other projects that we do with the B2C consumers and renewable energy communities.
Okay. Have you worked in Germany? It's usually at German conferences where privacy is a serious issue.
Well,
so it's encouraging to hear that's not the case everywhere.
Well, the data exchange must put privacy and security at the center of the discussion. So we are a data processor in a way. So we can ask authorization, but then the system must at all times have very clear who has access to your data as consumer, and the consumer must revoke their access at any point in time in the easiest way possible. This is of paramount importance. So far, for Google data center, their data center load is very critical and sensitive information. They're happy to share it with us as long as they can revoke our authorization. We comply with all the privacy and security rules because the service that we offer is helpful for them.
Yeah.
With these constraints, I think that everybody can work.
Okay. Mark, do you want to comment on that as well? Mark?
Yeah, sorry, that's better. I mean, it's linked to what you also raised in the beginning, right? What about what if consumers don't want to share that data? I think that what Simona said about companies, the same applies to citizens, individual consumers. It is the responsibility of the companies that want to make the offer, that want to provide a service, to convince the consumer that it's in his interest to then share the data that are needed to make that service work. What is not the consumer's responsibility is that when he decides that he would like to share the data, that he then also makes sure that these data can actually be shared, that they are in a format that is usable for the company that offers the service, and that this is handled properly and with, let's say, confidence, control of who has actually access to these data. So I think that there is a clear distinction there between what is a responsibility of the companies and where the consumer consent is a key step. Of course, I think linked to what also Stefan was saying about the market becoming more complicated. This, let's say, easy to understand what the kind of service is that people are buying. I think that is a tricky thing in energy when it becomes more digital, like it is in many other markets. So this is something where we specifically need to pay attention in energy, because energy now in the center of attention, and we want to use this type of new services as a way to engage citizens and to empower consumers. But at the same time, there are some very generic issues that need to be addressed when people buy, let's say, digital-driven services. But at the moment, where we see a problem with data exchange and where consumers are not happy to share their data, is when they see I have to buy a smart meter, I have to install it in my house, and then data generated by it that I don't control, and I don't see anything in return. So it's also a matter for us policymakers, network operators, to very quickly set up these markets for flexibility services, basically all the things that David was describing, in order to show to consumers that they can actually get something in return. And we've seen some very negative impacts of when there was no benefit for a consumer.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and one last thing, we need to make sure that that we take everybody along, because, of course, who is a vulnerable consumer in this type of digital world also changes.
Mm-hmm. There's one question specifically to you too, Mark. It's very early stages, obviously, but can you share any must-have items you envisage for the future data sharing standards and governance? Is there anything you can tell us about how those are likely to look, or what they will definitely contain?
No. I mean, that's a very I mean, I can only answer that at a high level, but I think then I'll be repeating myself.
Okay, so questioner, follow up with Mark in a couple of weeks, months time?
Let's say months.
Months, couple of months time. Okay, thank you. A question to you, David. Why multiply suppliers at a connection point if you can have aggregators to market your flexible consumption? I think that one's for you.
Yeah. It is not about having multiple suppliers or aggregators. I mean, to our opinion, it is up to market parties to determine what is the best service or the best constellation to enter into. So we definitely don't want to go in one direction or another direction. What we want to do is actually set up the minimal elements, taking back the hurdles, the barriers, in order to have market parties to come up with the best service ever, and to be sure that we have something that is quite generic, that we can apply for multiple situations, whether it's a heat pump, whether it's an EV, whether it's solar panels, whatever the constellation is. So it's not about one or another. It's about putting a evolution in market design in place that facilitates the solutions customers are asking for.
Okay, thank you. And I propose we finalize then with a trio of short questions to you, Stefan. One that came in was quite often consumers don't know exactly how much energy they use. When they're looking for the best deal, they're looking for packages from suppliers that are probably overestimating their needs. How can we address this problem of limited understanding of bills? And then two questions around price comparison, a role for commercial and private comparison tools, and also ultimately how much responsibility and liability can we put on these tools if, as you say, they're becoming so complex to develop. If you could try and say something brief on those three aspects, then we'll break for coffee.
Yeah, the first question is a very good one, and indeed CEER is also focusing this issue, as we currently, I guess, at the beginning of 2021, just published a paper on future-proof billing. So indeed, to be able to compare offers of new energy suppliers, it's of course crucial for a consumer to understand their energy bill, to understand their energy consumption, and therefore it's important to keep it for the consumer as simple as possible to understand the complexity of the market, but to enable them to participating in the market. There is a very nice rule. I don't know who's active of you in the stock market exchange. In the stock market exchange, there's one basic rule I've learned a lot in the past. They said, never buy a product you do not understand. And that's the same which is important for the energy consumers. They will be active if they understand what they buy and what's the value of the product for the consumer. Then they will be active. And it's very crucial to create the legal and regulatory framework in a way to enable them. If we do it in a way, in a public tool or private tool, in my personal point of view, it doesn't matter, but indeed in a private tool, the rules should be more clear, because one of the basics for comparison tool, one of the basic elements is trustful information. So it's crucial for comparison tools to be trustful, because without any trust that the background information of the tool is right and proper, the consumer cannot have a proper choice. So it's very crucial to set up the framework in this area, very specific and clear. And I guess the Commission, the member states, as well as CER, do so by giving guidance how to set up this in a proper way.
So I guess we can expect this, these concerns to be addressed in the upcoming renewed guidance from CEER as well. Okay, I think we've taken most of the questions that had come in, and we're overdue a coffee. I would say thank you very much to all 4 of our speakers, those here, those virtually. Can we have a small round of applause for them? And we'll break for coffee for 10 minutes. Let's resume at past. So see you all then. Hello and welcome back, everyone, or welcome to those who couldn't make it to the first part of this afternoon. Welcome to CEER's Customer Conference 2022. So we've just come away from a discussion about digitalization, new business models, price comparison tools, ways in which customers can navigate these current difficult times of high energy prices. And the idea now is to turn to, I guess, an even more current discussion about precisely what consumers can do in times of very, very high prices. We've got high prices, not very many green offers, high consumption. What happens now? So we're looking for practical examples here. To kick off the session, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Peter Liese, joining us from the European Parliament. I imagine a familiar face to many of you. He's been with the Parliament since the mid-90s, a member of the EPP, their coordinator, and sits on the Environment Committee on their behalf. Also a substitute on the Budgets Committee. I say that since he's going to be talking about the Social Climate Fund. And most relevant in today's Fit for 55 landscape, also rapporteur for the current EU ETS reform. So affordability and the European Social Climate Fund, how is it going to help us out, Peter?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. I wait the music to stop. So thank you very much for the invitation and the kind introduction. In fact, we are living in difficult times. Consumers are challenged with the high energy prices. And moreover, the biggest problem of these weeks is the war in Ukraine. And it's unfortunately strongly connected with the energy policy of the European Union and the member states. You see on the first slide, the headline, "We Finance Putin's War." I met this morning young people from the Ukraine that pushed for an embargo of energy from the European Union to Russian oil, gas, and coal. And to be honest, I know how difficult this is and that we are all very challenged already now. But I'm not able to say these young people from Ukraine, we just cannot do it. And we are at the end of our measures when it comes to sanctions. And after that meeting, I heard in the news, and I think this is now triggering debate much faster than we maybe expected, that the Kremlin decided today that the money that we spent for oil, gas, and coal to Russia will only be accepted in ruble, so the Russian currency. The argument of some that this money, 1 billion per day, or in average 600 million per day in the last weeks, will not help to fuel the war because Putin cannot make use of it because of the sanctions, is no more valid since 1 hour. So we need to really deal with the issue. And there is no easy solution. Everybody who thinks that is an easy one, and we just need to talk a little bit more to Putin and the war will be over, or we just need to stop paying the energy and everything will be fine. This is probably not the case, but we need more than ever really explore all the options. Also, because the war is the mother of all problems. And the war started before the 24th of February. Next slide, please. Yeah, here you see the development of the energy prices in the last months. It was already last year when we had skyrocketing electricity prices, for example, in Europe. The prices went up already in autumn. And the experts I talked to say that this is mainly due to the fossil fuel prices, very clear. The green small part is the ETS price, which also went up dramatically, but the big part of our problem is the price for fossil fuels. And why do I say the war started before the 24th of February? It's obvious that the troops were sent to the border of Ukraine, but Putin and his allies prepared the war already before that date. And one of their strategy, I'm quite sure, was to empty the storage in the European Union, which is partly owned by Russian companies like Gazprom, and that triggered the price increase. And so he prepared it well, and we prepared it very, very bad. So the big problem is Russian behavior. The big problem is our dependency from fossil fuels, and that's not only true for financing the war, it's also true for the energy prices for consumers and industry in Europe. Next slide. However, we also need to look at the ETS price and the consequences of this for consumers, mainly electricity consumers, and the industry also. We had, that's the left part of the slide, we had an increase of the carbon price. I think, yeah, now the slide is complete in my screen. You need to start in the left in July. Already before July, the price went up, and that was policy driven because the climate law, the Fit for 55 package, of course, gave a signal that CO2 allowances will be scarce, and the market reacted on that. But then in November, the price of ETS went up strongly because of the scarcity of gas. And you know, when you are in an ETS scheme and you burn coal instead of gas, because gas is not available or too expensive, you will immediately, of course, trigger a higher CO2 price, because more coal means a higher CO2 price. Then we also saw, I'm quite convinced, some speculation, like it is currently in the food price, in the price for wheat and other crops. We have not only market-driven development, but also speculation. And that's something we definitely need to look at. And here, yeah, something went wrong. I think we have no longer the right slide here. Yeah, okay. Now, look at the right part of the slide, then you see in February, around the 23rd of February, a price of CO2 almost 100 euro, with all the effects on industry and private consumers. It's a minor part of the problem, but in these challenging times, all contribution is of course important. And on the 23rd of February, I announced that as a rapporteur for the ETS, I will put an amendment on transparency, more control to the market, and a price regulation mechanism. And the price went down 10 euro. It's also not a lot, but for me, it's a proof that there was some speculation in it. And that's why I'm still convinced we need to act. Then the price collapsed when the war came out because people anticipated a major crisis and the lack of fossil fuels. And that may happen again today because the price went up again to 76 euro. But after the announcement of Putin that the money should come in ruble, I expect some serious debate now. So we need to be prepared for that. And I think we need to use all the measures not to weaken our targets. We need to come to the 2030 target. Very, very important. And the ETS is the core of the Fit for 55 package. We should not discourage everybody that invests in renewables, in energy efficiency, in heat pumps, in electric vehicles, in insulation of houses, in public transport. We need them desperately now because they will also enable us to be less dependent from fossil fuels. But we also need to see the price of the ETS, and I think we need to do whatever we can to avoid a sharp increase of the price so that the transition can go as fast as possible, but that we don't kill companies and lead to a situation where even consumers that are already in the transition, like those that just bought a heat pump, will not be frustrated with the high electricity prices. ETS 1 has a direct impact on the electricity price now, and that's why we need to look at it carefully. Now on the Social Climate Fund and the ETS 2, next slide, please. Those are very strongly interconnected. The ETS 1 has immediate effects on the electricity price and on other ETS participants like industry. The famous ETS 2 that the Commission has suggested will kick in only in a few years. So no effect on the price today. But it may be necessary in 25, 26 and 27 when hopefully the war is over and we do everything to stop this war. I hope we agree here that then things calm down and we still have our 2030 target. And we need the revenues from the ETS 2. And it's a clear point that no agreement on the Social Climate Fund is possible if we do not have the ETS 2, because member states will just not accept, and they need either a majority or even unanimity for this. So this is really a challenge. I'm desperately in favor of the Social Climate Fund. I criticize my own government in the country I know best. Germany, Chancellor Scholz is against. I think without the Social Climate Fund, we will not make the transition just. With the Social Climate Fund, we have a lot of opportunities. Next slide, please. People say, okay, we don't need ETS, especially not ETS 2, because we can do the trick with command and control. I don't think this is true. These are figures from Germany, but they are the same in almost 10 European countries that have a similar effort sharing target. The target for Germany in the transport sector is 3 times higher than even the most ambitious proposal that realistically can be expected to be adopted from Jan Huytema and Envy Committee. It is I don't see a majority for that, but even if there is a majority, we will only have 1/3 of the efforts that we need. And 2/3 need to become by other measures. And I don't know anyone who came with another proposal than the ETS 2. Next slide. And this is a picture or a graph, figures from Norway. Norway has already 50% electric vehicles on the road. Germany has 3.7. The Netherlands has a little bit more than Germany, but all the other member states are behind even. And still the Norwegian government, the environment minister was in Brussels 4 weeks ago, and I talked to him. Also, I pushed him and asked him desperately to give us more gas to be independent from Russia. But I also asked him what they are doing internally. And the clear message is they also need a CO2 price to decarbonize the rest of the 50%. So I'm sure we need ETS 2 even more than we needed it before. And we need to upfront the social climate fund. So upload so that the social climate fund comes in first. It enables those consumers that are in real need. There are many of us that will be challenged, and even people with a bit more than the average income will be challenged. But we need to focus our efforts on the poor and on the lower middle class that maybe has a job but needs the car to go to work. They need our support desperately, and that's what we are working for. I'm in constant dialogue with David Casa and Esther de Lange, who are the co-rapporteurs for the Social Climate Fund. And I think that is desperately needed, especially in these times. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm ready to take 1 or 2 questions, but unfortunately then I already have to leave to the next meeting. Thank you, and all the best for the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Are there 1 or 2 questions for Peter? I think we'll see if we can take 1 or 2. Sorcha? Yes. You'll have to, no, tell me your question, I'll repeat it. I've got a mic.
First, thanks for the presentation. So we, in the housing sector, we are concerned about the limitation of 20% of ETS revenue to be fed into the climate fund. And what we would prefer is for the 75% that is left at national level to make sure that indeed that reaches the most vulnerable groups that Peter has spoken about. Yeah.
Did you hear that, Peter? Because you actually got a mic.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay,
it was very clear. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I should come immediately. Okay, yeah, very good question. And give me support. The amendment is on the table. It is in my draft report. I support that 100% of the money that is generated by ETS 2 is spent according to the criteria of the Social Climate Fund. This is a fight that I first have to win in the Parliament. We are not yet there. And then we have to fight with the Council, which will be much more difficult. And we are even considering to increase the Social Climate Fund compared to the Commission proposal. Colleagues are looking for other revenues. It is difficult, but we will try. Definitely the big bulk needs to come from ETS 2. And the challenge is to really make it happen that the money is spent on purpose.
Okay, and 1 more question, and then we'll let you go. How can the Social Climate Fund be made effective and operational to provide real help for consumers to pay their gas bills?
Yeah, I think in the long term, the main problem, or the main challenge is that we all need to be less dependent from gas. If we pay a check every year, consumers will be in need for support forever and forever. If we change the system, for example, improve insulation, install a heat pump, and the problem of the tender and the tenant needs to be addressed. Now, we are talking for this now for 15 years. Now, finally, it's time to solve it. We are in a war, and we are paying this war, and the prices are going up and up and up because of the war. So we need to solve the problem and not continue to blackmail each other. So I think that's the key point. But in a time of transition, of course, money must also be spent directly to the low-income families, and it should be really targeted. It should be timely limited, and the big effort should be to really bring them out of energy poverty and not to finance energy poverty and let them in the same situation next year.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's ultimately you want to help them, but hopefully in a way which means they will be less dependent and have lower energy bills going forward, i.e. through things like energy efficiency investments with a longer term payback. Thank you very much for your time. Can we have a round of applause, please?
Thank you. And all the best. Thank you. Bye.
See you. Good luck. So let's move on then to the second part of the second session, our panel presenters and debate. So after that inspiring if challenging keynote by Peter Liese, I guess a reality check, as if we needed another one. We've got three speakers to talk about, well, the current times and what we as consumers can do to make the most of them is probably not the right thing, but to, I suppose, to live them as best we can and to manage our energy use and ultimately our energy bills, and at the same time carry on contributing to an energy transition that will hopefully serve all of our interests in the long run. So we've got three speakers for you. Sorcha Edwards, representing Housing Europe. We've got Christian Ruby here from Eurelectric. And finally, Ana Echerique Calvo, representing Spanish consumers. So we wanted to kick off with Sorcha, who just asked a question, so you had a very brief intro already, who, as I said, is Secretary General of Housing Europe, which is the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing. She's headed it up for close on the last 10 years now. And I believe you wanted to talk a little bit about the role or the value of prosumer, self-consumption in energy communities and how that those might be interesting initiatives and helpful in these current times.
Yes, thanks a lot.
You want to stand?
Oh, yeah.
I'll invite you to stand here. It might be more comfortable. Sure. I'll just take that. And please do send in questions as they occur to you. I'll be keeping an eye on them as they come in.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation to be here today. So obviously, Housing Europe, we are primarily concerned about ensuring access to decent housing for all, but what decent housing means now is future-proof building. So we heard about future-proof billing just before the break, but we're looking at future-proof building and future-proof renovation. So the sector, just as a bit of background, it brings together all of the public, social, and cooperative housing providers. So it's about 43,000 different types of local organizations, all working to future-proof their stock and keep up the supply of new build. And I think this is where I would like to maybe kick off, and I think probably good to follow up on Peter's let's say reality check on it also was reflected in the last meeting we had with our members last week, and that is the Ukraine crisis and the impact. So first, primarily, we see these double the two goals that they are looking, so the renovation and the new supply, very clearly come to the fore. So they have been really called upon by local authorities and of their own, obviously their own will, to scramble to look, okay, what units are available for the new refugees that are arriving now in the EU. So that is one of the biggest challenges facing them. And then, of course, to rapidly speed up the efforts to have a resilient answer to the need to make those homes resilient, make communities resilient and future-proof when it comes to the energy transition. So they are working at a few different levels. I think probably some of those topics came up in the last session. So if we look at let's say, the more urgent entry point, it's really about those people without the agency to do anything about the home they live in, but who can take simple measures to understand their bills better and to have, let's say, an immediate alleviation of energy poverty that they may be in. So looking at the simplest advice. So in that we are working a lot with sort of community outreach, social services, care services, to make sure that any of those simple measures, that people know how to take them and know the right services that are available for them. So that is really, you know, on the sort of cold face of energy poverty and alleviating that immediate need through simple means. Then, of course, the energy efficiency level, that's where the sector, I think, really has probably the most expertise of any actors in the built environment, because they have to push this through at a large scale. So we estimate they're renovating about 200,000 every year now in the sector. So the challenge is to do that in a way that's going to be user-friendly, so comfortable homes, in a way that is also not high maintenance. So not overly complicated, not introducing an over-reliance on mechanical ventilation, etc. So how can you do that in the most cost-effective way over the long term? And there, often the housing providers are stepping in, but working together with consumers and with people living in the homes. There, and I think a really important example is linked to the first, so linked to this lack of neutral, empowering information that isn't really reaching consumers. And there, in the energy efficiency side, we're working on a project called Open Gela, with excellent examples actually run by local authorities in Spain. So providing those one-stop shops for all consumers living in the area, whether that is in social housing or ownership housing, so people can access neutral, trusted information and access trusted service providers in the construction sector to get the work done and make their home energy efficient. And then, of course, the issue of really making consumers co-players in this whole transition and giving a genuine ownership. So not just a sense of ownership, but a real ownership in the energy transition. And that is going down the road of community energy, of they call it self-consumption, so decentralized ownership of energy. And this is, I mean, obviously the framework is at European level offers a lot, and we can't really be critical there. But what we are seeing is that there's still a lot to improve at local level in terms of tax rules. We see just even close to home here in Flanders, the Flemish social housing provider is rolling out rooftop PV in 650,000 homes, but the incentive structure changed halfway through. The tax is being added both when you produce and when you use and when you deliver to the grid. So they had a radical change in the whole incentive structure, even from when they had the funding. This is coming through funding coming through EIB to rolling out the PVs themselves. So this is just an example, and we're seeing this ongoing lack of the right regulatory framework for consumers to roll out energy communities, roll out prosumer capacity through in different regions. We hear similar from Germany. The tax issues haven't been solved yet. I feel like we've been talking about them for a very long time. And hopefully now this current situation is going to give a real push to make this decentralization happen. It's not going to tick all the boxes. I think we have to. The energy that's not used is the best energy. So we really have to go as far as we can on the energy efficiency side, as long as that is cost optimal. And then I would just finish up. I don't want to take too much time on the kickoff, but the funding and the link to the whole regulatory structure is quite key. I mean, obviously, we are still potentially looking at bills of between even 80,000 per unit potentially with units that are hard to treat in the sector, going up to 120,000 per unit when you look at moves to get off grid. So we're looking still at very high prices for renovation, and that is even for not just individual consumers, for that is even in the professionals in the sector who are working to bring down the price of renovation but are still facing very high prices. So I think we do need to a constant reality check of what this is going to cost in terms of, for homeowners, but also tenants, and also even social housing tenants, because at the moment we're not managing to square that. We're not managing to stick to the promise of cost neutrality. And this is what we can't afford to have. We can't afford to have a situation of renoviction, so when people can no longer afford to live in their home because it has been renovated. So we need to have a realistic look at the cost, make sure the funding available is helping to really square that circle when it comes to making sure we maintain affordability after renovation, which is not really the case yet. We're looking at allies like Peter Lisa, who recognise the costs involved, to make sure that the European Climate Fund can actually be a relevant tool. We know that there's a lot of concern from consumer organisations about the fact that those without agency to change their oil heating potentially are going to be taxed on this. So we're going to need a very tight circuit. That funding that is revenue that's generated from ETS2 is really invested as quickly as possible to improve those conditions. But we do definitely see this as a needed instrument. So carbon pricing needs to be part of the picture to improve the funding, but it has to be done in a clever way, and we can't be limited to only those 25%. I'll leave it there as a kickoff.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that and for raising, I guess, a number of points that will hopefully inspire questions as well. And for the three-tiered approach you set out, starting with the simplest need, simply to provide neutral, impartial information, making sure people know and are aware, then energy efficiency, and finally, for the energy demand that's left after that, thinking about community energy and self-consumption opportunities, and obviously the cost, the affordability dimension. And interesting the note you ended on. It's true, we don't often, I certainly haven't heard so much about that, about ensuring affordability after renovation, that's also a key something to bear in mind. Thank you. Let's move on then to our next speaker, Christian Ruby, here as Secretary General from Eurelectric, perhaps familiar to some of you, at least from his days prior to that, as Chief Policy Officer at Wind Europe, and before that worked in the former Climate Commissioner's cabinet, Connie Hedegaard. So, Christian, over to you.
Thank you. Energy efficiency, very important topic to speak on these days, because we are truly in an unprecedented situation. Ukraine has been a real game changer. Up until the 24th of February, we still believed that we were looking at an unusual price environment with surging prices, difficult situation for the industry, for customers. What we realized on the 24th of February was that what we had in fact been experiencing and witnessing was a targeted effort as part of a military strategy to invade Ukraine and to paralyze Europe and make Europe unable to reply to the Russian aggression. What that means is that we need to reassess many things that we've been doing. We need to look at a different bucket of measures to tackle this situation, and we should not be too dogmatic and stick too much to all positions. We need to be ready to engage openly to see how we tackle this European crisis. Because it is true, as Peter-Lise said, we are currently indirectly funding the Russian aggression. It is not a nice thing to say, but it is true. And that means that we have to make tough choices that really cut across the board. And that also means that energy efficiency becomes something of almost a strategic priority for Europe. Now, energy efficiency, I feel, sometimes has been addressed a little bit as a thing that nobody should be able to feel in any way, other than maybe just have a slightly cheaper bill. I think we have to open our minds to a much more robust, handheld effort on energy efficiency, one that can really be felt. And I think we can go much further than we have thought before, and that should probably also be reflected in the European policy framework across the board. My second point would be that, fortunately, the Green Deal holds a lot of the answers to the current situation. Not all of them, but a significant part of them. Essentially, decarbonization and geopolitics have now become two parts of the same coin. We need to double down on the Green Deal as our strategy to wean ourselves off this dependency, and we need to revisit the energy files one by one and see how they need to be amended and adjusted in light of what has been happening. In the medium term, it is, of course, about building new types of energy systems that allow us to substitute what we're currently using. That's rolling out renewables, other carbon neutral sources, ASAP. We also know that's going to take time. So we need to look with urgency at substitution, diversification in the short term, but also efficiency, energy savings. Good news here is that electrification, which is key to decarbonization, is also very much an energy efficiency strategy. Look at the heat pump we can install in a house. It has an efficiency of up to 3 times the one of its colleague boiler, the gas boiler. So there's really a no regret in replacing gas boilers with heat pumps. And we have the curious situation that 20 member states still, in some way or the other, incentivize gas boilers. It's almost unbelievable, and this is something that needs urgent political response. BEUC has mentioned in a study that the savings for the consumers of shifting to a heat pump can amount up to 25% of the bill. So there's an obvious win-win for the customer, for Europe and its strategic priorities, and for decarbonization by focusing, doubling down, and accelerating electrification. We also have to be honest, it's going to take some time. We can massively accelerate the pace of heat pumps, but we're looking at a rollout already in the old scenarios of 30 million heat pumps over 9 years, and that's from a basis of 15 million today. So we need to install in 10 years the double amount of what has been installed up until now. So we are looking at some very, very steep curves. My last message would be that we need to think about the customer in all this. We need to protect the customer because the strain on customers is real, and we need to find out how we do this best. I think Peter-Lise said some very, very important things on this. The European coffers are just not big enough to bail everybody out of this. So we cannot expect that we can we can compensate everybody from this. The only way to deal with this is to use less gas. And we need to have a hands-on approach to do that, and we need to do it in a different way than we have been doing until now. It needs to be much faster, and it needs to be more controlled in the way we address this. Take the example of another bad habit. If you're a smoker, it's great to have cheap cigarettes, but the only way to break your addiction is actually to stop smoking. So there's some tough choices that need to be made, and they need to be made now, because we have an unprecedented situation and an untenable moral challenge in front of us that we need to act on. So while looking at customers and protecting customers, we need to be smart. We need to do what's right, but we also need to target our efforts. There are some customers that we need to focus and protect right now, right here, and those are the most vulnerable. They deserve our focus, and then at the same time, we need to make sure that the incentives to change remain for the rest. The problem is that if we regulate prices too much, if we compensate people too much, there's no incentive to shift, and we need that incentive. We need a clear pedagogical sign that things need to change. Therefore, we're also a bit concerned about the many signals of intervening too much in the market. As I said, we are ready to discuss because we know it's a new situation. The market design is not perfect, and it needs to evolve, but some of the current things that are being done, for instance, clawback mechanisms, are not helping customers, not right here, right now, because they're not bringing down prices, and essentially they're just bringing a lot of additional bureaucracy onto companies. So what we do to the market needs to be smart, and it needs ultimately also to protect investor confidence, because more than ever, we need investors to have trust in investments they make in electricity. They need to see a return so that we divert investments away from the fossil fuels and into clean electricity. That's the way forward. So the regulatory approach needs to have a balance between customer protection and investor confidence. And those would be my last words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And an interesting note to conclude on, I think. And also, I think a welcome fresh attention on energy efficiency, which has ostensibly been our #1 priority all of these years. But I guess you could question how far it's been implemented as our #1 priority, and it'll be interesting to see now whether it truly is energy efficiency first and how much it can deliver in that case. And I thought interesting too, as you point out, that electrification. I guess we know it, but we don't hear it said every day, is in itself an energy efficiency strategy, because electric engines used for electricity is inherently more efficient than combusting or burning a fossil fuel like gas or oil. Thank you. A reminder to please send in questions. You should have an opportunity to do that on the right-hand side of your screen via Slido. They'll come through to me here, and we'll put them to our panelists in a couple of moments once we get to the Q&A. And that leaves me then to introduce our final, last but not least, speaker in this panel, Ana Echenique Calvo, Vice President of CEER, the Spanish Consumer Association, or I understand rather a confederation of many existing consumer groups in Spain. She's been with them for about 20 years as well, if I'm not mistaken. Is it that long? Not quite that long.
Yes, that long.
Okay. And I think great to have someone from Spain here. We ran a feature on Energy Monitor on energy poverty not so long ago, and the writer is Spanish and spoke about Spain. And what I remember from the opening the stand first was that Spain saw the biggest increase in citizens at risk of energy poverty in 2020. And she went on to talk about some of the initiatives underway And yeah, to what extent those are delivering. Unfortunately, her conclusion was there is still a lot of work to be done. But I think a very interesting case study for Europe too, all the more so in these times over the risk we face and how do we keep the energy transition and energy affordable for the population. So go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And I'm really happy to be here. And it's a pity I couldn't listen to the speakers before. Well, I've been listening to Christian and Sorcha, and I really agree with almost everything they have said. I'd like to start remembering that we're in such a chaotic situation, but this was predicted practically in 1972 when the team of the Massachusetts, the MIT, did this work on the limits of growth. All of this was really put on the table. It was in a book, and there have been lots of articles and different things about it. And here we are talking about all this that has been predicted for more than 50 years. So now, what is our problem? Now we are in a dramatic situation, environmentally, socially, and economically. And the basis now, our problem, our direct problem now, is the high price and of energy and the offer, the green offer, that's not enough to cover this. So how can we manage this? Why has this happened? Well, I think that it has, it's a cause of very little information, of many governance that has been from up to down. And we are, and now when we think about it, when people talk about consumers and about customers, in this case, you're talking, customers always pay. Whatever goes wrong, whatever gets in a mess in any way, at the end, customers always pay. So, and then all the decisions come to customers without their position, their points of view, whatever. So now, why are we in this position? Why have we let this situation get to this point? I think that the last 40, 30 years have been little by little, we've been going through a capitalist point of view with very little democratic control and thinking of the future. It has been all short-term view, and all of a sudden we find ourselves here. And why have we accepted to pay such high prices for a long time? Now they're extremely high, but we have been little by little reaching to levels that were really very difficult for a normal citizen to pay. I think that in many parts, the way we live now, the day to day, what we don't see straight away, we don't realize it, and really we pay our electricity bills through the bank. So if we'd had to go and pay it with our money once a month and take our bills and our coins out of our pockets, then we would have realized how much we were paying. But all of a sudden you receive this paper from the bank saying that your bill has been paid, and well, that's how it is. So how it's not transparent. We don't really realize what's going on. So how can we educate consumers? That's a big challenge. And I think that to educate consumers now, first we have to reach them. And how do we reach all the different types of consumers? We have different ages, cultural levels, social levels, economical levels, and consumers and customers have lost confidence in most of the messages they have been receiving all these years. So now we have to start thinking, in every change we make now, we have to start thinking on the regular citizens' needs. What do people need? how much electricity does a person need? How are their homes constructed? How are their houses so that they can use less electricity for a better comfort? I think that one of the points that I saw from I couldn't hear Peter Liese, but he talked about the stock market in a moment and the stockholders. And I think that that's absolutely old-fashioned. I mean, it can't be that people give their money to someone, to a company, to make it grow. However, in any way, it doesn't matter how. That is so illogic. That has so little to do with people in their houses trying to get warm or take a shower or cook, that it makes it absurd. And when you hear how the stock market started with the Clippers bringing the tea from India and betting which of those boats was going to get there first, I mean, it's incredible that we got all the way here. In any case, now we are at a point that Christian has talked about the New Deal. We need a new deal, a new social, economical, environmental deal. And I want to emphasize in the right. I mean, electricity and energy has to be a right, and we don't need, the big part of the population doesn't need now to be looked after, to be taken care of. I mean, we should be in another point. So how can we reach this point? I think that now all decisions have to start being little by little. It's a process. We all have to learn about it. But we have to start with conversations. They have to be, like when you sit with your family or with your neighbors to reach an objective, to solve a problem, we have to sit around the table and we have to talk. And if those conversations are multi-generational and multidisciplinary, that is the best. That would be the best way to know exactly where we're going and what we want to do. And these conversations would construct what we want. Christian was also talking about, I can't remember how you call it, organizing the market, regulations. If we started with more participation of citizens, of consumers, of all persons that are involved in this, then we would reach a different point. So now the challenge is, how do we reach consumers? How do we explain? How can they understand what's going on? It's really difficult. I mean, a very short time ago, we did this project that was a manual for surviving, and we passed the whole work we had done with lots of organizations and how we will survive for this next hard future that comes. And we made a group of children around 15 years old read it. And when they understood it, we changed it, we adapted it to what they understood. And then we did the manual, because everyone has to understand what every one of us is saying. And in most of these meetings, these events, we realized that if we took this group of 15-year-olds to listen, would they understand what's being said? So this is a challenge, to use a normal language, to make any type of consumers be interested in it, to think they are able to be involved, and especially to have a clear and trustworthy transition to another model that I think is the only way out in this moment. I think that's all. I hope I've been right in time.
Yeah, you have been. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So bringing it back to basics, we should be thinking about what people actually need, and the importance of conversations with different people, and also for those conversations to be as broad as possible and in simple language. What you said towards the end, you could be a journalist. That's always that's the main challenge we face, to try and describe sometimes complex ideas or situations, but in simple language, so without sacrificing the complexity You can, without, I suppose, becoming inaccurate, so remaining accurate and explaining something complex, yet in a simple way that many people can relate to it and understand it. And that's certainly what some of my best writers are able to do. And it's a real skill. It's not easy.
And it doesn't mean you're going to make it banal. I don't know how to say it in banalize it.
It's not simplified, but it's understandable, accessible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Very true. Thank you for that. So let's move on to Q&A then. We've had a bunch of questions that have come in the meantime. Okay, so we've got about, let's see, a good 20 minutes or so for questions, so do keep them coming. There's a couple of questions to specific people, but let's start with a simple one, and I don't know who's best place to answer it. If one is thinking of becoming a prosumer, how many years does it take for the initial investment to pay itself back? So a very practical question. Is there anyone who can give or hazard an answer or give us a range, perhaps?
Well, I think it really depends on the offer you take, but one of the things with a high price environment is that investing in energy efficiency and alternative generation solutions will pay off very quickly for you. Right now, the issue in the market is really that you have a lead time on many of these things, meaning that it's difficult to get a solar panel, and you'll probably experience a long lead time also if you order new types of equipment, same with an EV and so on and so forth. But often you'd be looking at lead times or let's say payback times 3 to 4 years if it's the right project. I should also say that many companies, including energy retailers, are looking into helping customers with this and saying, well, we can actually help you finance this and sort the payback as part of the normal billing. This is a new way of retailers to actually help people in the transition.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And another practical question, and Sorcha, it's about energy communities. You mentioned them specifically, so maybe you can take on that one. How common are they in Europe today, and is there a tendency for more of them? Are they growing?
Been focusing more on energy cooperatives, which is, let's say, classed under the directive as a type of energy community, and also within a building, so where a housing provider is managing an estate or a building, rolling out renewable energy for self-consumption within that neighborhood. But what we are seeing is a big shift, an increase due to improvements in regulatory framework. It's in Austria, France, Spain in recent years, but definitely not rolled out as far as it can. And I think we can't blame the EU on that, because I think the recent framework, I think it really is being promoted from EU level, but we are still finding, as I explained earlier, different, let's say, take for example a definition of a housing cooperative. If they become an energy producer to produce energy for direct consumption within the building, they lose their tax exemption as a housing cooperative because they are not classed as an energy provider. So administrative blockages like that, and as I mentioned earlier in the Flemish example, taxing at different stages of the process, which actually disincentivizes. So we are not seeing enough of these rolling out. But I would also like to stress a little bit on that point, because we're looking now at the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Energy Performance of Building Directive, and there's a real push for energy positive buildings. So all of our stock should be energy positive by 2050. So whereby buildings should be extremely energy efficient, and the rest of the energy should be provided on site or nearby, or through energy communities. And we find we would need a bit more flexibility there, because if you have sufficient renewable energy coming through from the grid, we do not see why this should not be counted. So we think that the Commission is being a little bit over prescriptive there when it comes to energy communities. So everything should be done to promote them where they really fit in the local context and can really add value. But I think taking this over prescriptive approach that we see now in the current draft of the directive it's a little bit a step too far.
But one thing.
Thank you. And then there's
I want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, it's not only using and paying in a different way for energy. I think we have to change our model. People, we're talking about this as if we would continue living the way we are, wasting so much energy as we do. Sorcha just talked about redoing the houses so that they are energy efficient. And that's the first point. We can't work on energy before we aren't efficient in the way the houses work. And the same thing in the way we use our electricity. And so there's a long way, let's say, that we have to make it shorter to make people understand that we're in a different stage. I mean, this won't be as it has been for the last 30 years. We won't make it. We have to change our minds. There is a new philosophy where we have to have in mind many other things, not only how much will I save or how much can I use or how much can I pay.
Well, this next question then is probably a good one for you to take on. Someone's asking, beyond the financial incentive, why should consumers be concerned with energy efficiency, especially if the energy system becomes increasingly electrified and therefore more environmentally friendly? It's quite a good question.
Well, I think that the problem is the future, because even if we use panels, solar panels, I mean, those panels have a life. I mean, they're useful for 30 years or 40 or 25. I don't know exactly, depending when. But those, what are we going to do with those? We talk about electric cars, but to build each car, we need 40,000 liters of water. And that's one of the problems that's right there, water. So it's not only money, it's not only what we can save. What type of a future are we organizing for our children and grandchildren? In '87, United Nations did this. There was in '87, sustainable development was promoted by Harlem Brundtland, that said, sustainable development is that which meets the needs of the present generation without compromising future ones. So that's what we really have to keep in mind. What are we doing to the future generations?
Yeah, so your point is every form of energy production, therefore ultimately consumption, has a resource or a resource footprint. So it always makes sense to try and optimize our use of it, even if it's produced in a green way. Christian?
And have a global view.
So, yeah.
Well, I'd add maybe just 2 points on why this continues to be relevant. First of all, even green energy has a cost. So saving money can make good sense also in a green economy. The other thing is that if we look at the entire energy production in Europe today, only 20% is renewable. So we have quite a way to go also to let's say, to use both energy savings and clean energy sources as a way forward.
Okay. There's a couple of questions to you, Christian, around, I guess, market design and financial support. So one, because you mentioned clawback measures, and you said market intervention, we should try and keep that to a minimum whilst protecting the vulnerable. So the question is, what's your position on clawback measures on fossil fuel companies, especially those receiving sometimes implicit subsidies?
Well, I would say I would be more positive towards clawbacks if they were actually targeted towards the fossil fuels. The problem is that the clawbacks are targeted towards the carbon-free sources today. Those are the ones having money confiscated in the current setup, and this is what's so deeply problematic. So the bottom line in all this remains, how do we ensure that there is a business case and that people feel comfortable investing in the electricity sector at this critical point in time? Because if we continue to have an ad hoc situation where 27 member states intervene in 27 different ways in the market, we can be sure that there will never be a dollar flowing, for instance, from American investors. They will be looking at this this weird continent with 27 tiny little countries that all do different things at the same time. There needs to be some clarity for the investors to double down on what we need to do, which is to decarbonize and electrify.
Would you be, as a follow-up, supportive? I know there's been talk, certainly in the UK, probably elsewhere, of a clawback, a tax, a windfall tax on oil and gas companies in the wake of, well, enormous profits of late?
Well, I think it's really for those industries to sort of respond to how that would look. My point here is we need to make clear investment incentives for the industries that we want to base our future on.
Yeah, okay, that's clear. And a question on who do you think should financially support the electrification of customer demand? Governments, the EU, or companies offering those services? And what rate of electrification do you foresee by 2050?
I think it needs to be a combination. We've heard about a number of EU tools that can be deployed today. In your lecture, we say that the Social Climate Fund should be double in size. So there's definitely something to be done at EU level. I think we've also heard today, which was really interesting, there's a lot happening at EU level, and sometimes it's just not trickling down or being sufficiently reflected at the local level. So there's really something to do with matching those levels and making sure that things are happening on the ground. As I said, energy companies are keen to play a role also in working with consumers to make those investments. And I do also think that governments have a role to play to for instance, target specific vulnerable customer segments. There's the social housing sector where governments can accelerate action when it comes to energy efficiency, electrification, looking at everything from schools to hospitals, et cetera. There's a lot national governments can do. The last point I would mention here is that it's not only about subsidies, it's really about market arrangements, it's about overall incentive structures, it's about standards and rules that will ultimately also guide investments. There's a risk that we enter into a subsidy race where we try to put a subsidy on everything. What's really important is that there's clarity in the framework that allows people to sort of put their money where they need to go.
Yeah. Anna?
Sonia?
Go ahead.
One thing, I absolutely agree with what Christian is saying, and I'd add another something. This is the moment for a conversation of what Europe we need, what Europe we want now. We're in a very specific time. And maybe it's a silly idea, but the same way we have the Erasmus for students, there should be Erasmus for different sectors, where people could move around and see how other people are doing it, where neighborhoods can go and visit other neighborhoods somewhere else and see how things are working. We need more of a common culture in Europe to take this big step and start these conversations, let's say, but being very simple. But I think we have to construct a different way of doing things. And now we're stuck here in subsidies and this and that. And I think there will be different ways of doing it.
And how radically would, I guess it's potentially to all three of you, would you say we need to change our electricity market design to bring about a new way of doing things? Do we need to decouple electricity prices from gas prices, for example? How do we I mean,
Yes.
we've all talked about the importance of markets. How radical or how far-reaching can and should we be looking to change markets now? Sorry, Anna.
We would be in a different point.
So yes, you think we should, for example, decouple electricity from gas prices? I don't know. Any other thoughts in terms of market design?
It's a very difficult debate for the moment because on the one hand, we are very unhappy about those ad hoc interventions that are happening in the market as we speak. On the other hand, as I said, in such an unprecedented situation, you have to be able and ready to engage and discuss what can be done. We've said for many years that there are a few things that need to change in the market. We need longer term investment signals for people to build the right things. We need potentially a different setup between wholesale and retail markets. A new balance needs to be found. We need to take into account that the future system is one that is much more decentralized than the one that we have today. We assess that 60 to 70% of all new assets will be connected to the distribution grids. How do we reflect that in the market design? I will not claim to have all the answers, and in fact we're conducting some research into this because we know this is one of the most important questions. So I think it's a bit early to say exactly how it needs to be, but it's important to have that discussion and find out how we create a system and a framework that is basically future-proofed to the way we can see that the system is changing.
Exactly. One more thing, please. I think we're talking about long-term culture. We have to shift to another view of the way we organize and we project and we design things. Long-term. Christian just said it. Okay.
Sorcha, do you want to?
This idea of the Erasmus. So we've just started something called the Affordable Housing Initiative. It's a flagship of the renovation wave to look at really successful district approaches to the renovation wave, which, let's say, really show the diverse approaches. I think that, Anna, you spoke about as well. We see in some neighborhoods they're tapping into residual heat from industry can actually bring the neighborhood a long way in terms of supplying the heat needed. We see that in some cases, yes, new establishment of a district heating system. We see in other maximizing the use of rooftops. So it's really diverse, the different ways that communities are finding to make their neighborhood more resilient. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind as well, because Christian, you talked about regulatory stability for big investors, but we also have to keep in mind that the diversity of different answers to resilience at different local levels, which might not be, I'm sure there is a way to reconcile the two, but in some cases it's not big investors that are needed to make the community more resilient. It's even people themselves living in the neighborhood and maximizing the local resources and maximizing circular economy potential. So it's how we can reconcile these two. But yes, definitely in terms of regulatory stability, as we said earlier, for prosumers and for energy communities, quite a lot to be done there as well.
Okay. We had one more technical question to come in. I don't know if any of you, I don't think any of you are engineers, so if not, we'll pass. But the question was, sometimes there seems to be a common belief that gas pumps are more effective than electric heat pumps. Is there any truth to this in technical terms?
Gas pumps?
Gas pumps.
Gas boilers,
I would say gas boilers, that should probably be. Otherwise, you're talking about a hybrid gas. I mean, you've got hybrid heat pump, which, yeah.
The heat pumps, we are seeing a radical increase in the rollout, but the unit has to be at a certain level of airtightness before that can work efficiently.
Yeah.
Otherwise your electricity bills are going to really go through the roof.
That's my understanding too. The heat pump it's very important that the heat pump is adapted to its environment, so that it's the right size, and so it can be super efficient, but you need to make sure it's correct for the way where it's being installed.
And some
Optimized.
multi-unit blocks, maybe of heritage blocks, for instance, it might not work, but definitely it's one of the answers that we need to be rolling out.
From a pure engineering point of view, the electric heat pump is way more efficient, but it's true. It's also about how it's being installed.
Yeah, in physics terms, indeed, the heat pump is a lot more efficient than burning gas in a boiler. Yeah. To whoever asked that question. Okay, we're going to have to wrap up in a moment. Let's see, we've got 2 minutes left or so. One other question was, a more provocative question, do we need politicians to be frank and say that we're in a time of war, the energy sector is severely impacted, we've got sanctions, we simply need to accept that we are not going to be as well off as before? Things are going to be tougher and more expensive. Is that a message our politicians should be communicating, and would they have a shot at communicating that?
I think empowering people to use less energy in every way they can. I think we need political leadership and political investment on that, so that living with less and having living in dignity using less energy is possible.
Yes, and I think politicians have to start listening to people and to normal people, and because many times they're way far away from what reality is.
Yeah, so perhaps rather than communicating that we need to be happy or content with less, it's a question of you can be equally, if not more content with less if you re-examine your actual needs. We could be politicians, repackage it like that.
Must be horrible to be in a government now, these days.
Okay, I think we've gone through all of our questions. Any final thoughts from any of you? Otherwise, I propose we move to our round of conclusions. Okay, a round of applause for our panelists. Okay, and that brings us to the final part of today. And we've got Natalie McCoy and Jana Hasova, who are going to wrap up today and tell you everything you need to be taking home with you to mull over further. They're the co-chairs of CEER's Customers and Retail Markets Working Group. Natalie was previously Secretary General of CEER and nowadays works at Portugal's energy regulator, where she heads up their international relations office. And Jana works for the Czech energy regulator, again, heading up international affairs. So I certainly learned a lot today. I'm looking forward to the summary. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sonia. My name is Jana, and let me please, and of course, good afternoon to you all, and thanks for a fruitful discussion. Let me please now sum up the main topics discussed today during the conference. So I will start with the welcoming words of Annegret Krebel, President of CEER. She opened today's CEER Customer Conference by mentioning the current situation on the not only energy market, but mentioning the COVID-19 pandemics, also the high energy price spikes, and also the impact of the Russian invasion, which all impacts the energy sector, of course. Annegret stated that the green transition remains one of the most pressing issues of our times. Consumers have the important role to play in the energy transition, of course, and they have to be both. They have to benefit and also they have to contribute to it to reach the climate neutrality. They have to be also properly informed to be able to play the active role. We have to engage them, and of course we have also to protect them. We have a good prerequisite for develop functioning more energy markets, which were already settled in the legislation. That it means the benefit for everybody, for all the stakeholders, especially consumers. Annegret also stressed the importance of the energy efficiency principle, which provides support, which provides us with technologies, and also it tackles patterns or consumer behavior that goes hand in hand, definitely, for the future, for the consumer behavior, and how the consumer is also reacting to those current issues on the market. We definitely have to provide the customer with a range of green and also affordable offers. And there has to be, as mentioned, the robust policy framework to protect the consumer. So if I may now pass to the starting session, the discussions on the third transition, digitalization, new business models, and decarbonization. This session started by Mark von Stipholt from DG Enner stated that the energy transition requires a digitalized energy system and easy and simple data exchange. Of course, we all are aware that data is of most importance, most relevant. There are so many data we have nowadays to tackle with. They has to be interoperable among different stakeholders, and especially for consumers to be of evidence, and it has to be clear stated what is the consumer data. And also we had a question on what to do if consumers don't want to share those data. Mark stressed in particular following policy priorities, which is demand response and flexibility markets, smart charging of electric vehicles, and also smart buildings and renovations. These were the main issues to be focused on. Also, he mentioned the digitalization of the energy action plan that foresees to address how to make data exchange easy and simple to support these energy policy priorities. As already mentioned, the question is how can be data securely shared with third parties, which kind of data, how to deal with data in general. The consumer interest is in sharing data. Also, what does this mean? Not only the consumer has to be aware, but he has to take profit when sharing his data. What was also stated was that there is a need to have first very intelligent grids, and seeing current situation, that means now the Russian invasion, of course, speed up faster the procedure. Then after, Stefan Arendt took over, one of my colleagues from CEER. Simon, sorry, for the interpretation. So Simone stated from Flexideo stated or informed about new business models that are already in place and also in preparation. He opened the question, what does it actually mean to consume green energy? He mentioned the being green every single day. He mentioned the green power 24/7 concept service, which is now ongoing. He informed about what that does really mean, what kind of energy the consumer is buying, or the companies are buying when they want to buy green energy, that they are in reality buying green certificates. So how to move from that kind of procedure to the new concept that's called next generation procurement. So that means to be more transparent to the consumer, to get the right price signals, to foster innovations, to be cost efficient when doing those innovations and when deploying renewables. And definitely, and what is important for the consumer to understand clearly is what the consumer, what is the footprint of consumer on the planet. Then after now being back by Stefan's presentation, Stefan presented how to enable and activate the active participation in the changing world. He presented his own case study, so to say, and the aim behind is how to make an easy access to neutral and objective information on available offers on the market, how to understand, how to decide, and how to even enable an advantageous decision. It's definitely clear that there are tools, very useful ones, which means the PCT's price comparison tools. But of course, the first prerequisite is to be aware of the own consumption one has. So to be even able to first of all be aware of what you consume, then after you can check the offers through such a tool. This tool is digital, and of course we are today dealing with digitalization. Nevertheless, we have also to be aware of people that they are not that digitalized and being able to get access, and we have also to be aware of it and go for what we called in our vision, CEER Vision 2030. Aspire principles, one of those is inclusiveness, and also to have a look at those types of consumers. And definitely you can get the insight, and it was stated more times during the conference today, that there are various types of consumers. Stefan mentioned also when he was renting a flat, what was his how was his attempt to get into the contract, and then one having a house or his own house or equipment. So, and how to deal on this side also with green offers. What was mentioned and what CEER is looking into ongoing, and now, as was mentioned also, we have the new update ongoing on the guidance of good practice for comparison tools, so that we are going into what should be, how that should be provided, how that can be done to that the consumer can be guided the best through the PCT to get to his finally find his contract. What we are looking for, and the aim is to be future-proofed, given the fact of all the complexity on the market, in the energy market today. Then after David took over, mentioning the situation from the TSO's perspectives in Belgium, he held a presentation on a new service, which is the Energy as a Service, how to tackle, or how to not only to guarantee the balancing, but also how to enable the customer to be actively participating in the market, which means how consumer can be involved in the system. He mentioned peer-to-peer activities. That means also it's competition beyond the meter. There can be an exchange between neighbors, so that it can start with the consumer. It's a movement from the or to a more consumer-centric design, which is a new market design of active involvement of consumer participation. that means innovation on the side of the consumer, and of course the consumer has to be well informed about his possibilities, because it does not mean that he is exposed to the price volatility as such when once getting involved in that way. So what did that mean? Or to conclude, it's about better services and more efficient systems, and also to have access to real-time data, which all that means to let the consumer be involved and also to make informed choices in the system. It's in general, as it was said, data and real-time driven service. And so we are now at the beginning about data, about sharing data, about need for data, and about how to engage the consumer, how to convince him, and it was stated also in the second session of our consumers, how to make consumer to trust into the system, to get actively involved, how to convince him to take part in the transition. And we are trying to set up the scene so that he can be fairly treated in the transition and to be part of. So, and now it's time that I can pass to my colleague Natalie to give you some up of the second part of our of our conference today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jana. I'm afraid for everyone, I won't be quite as structured and organized as Jana was. There are so many ideas bouncing around that I just took around some keywords, and a lot of the ideas very much came together from the different speakers. And we had quite a range. I mean, we had a good spectrum between policymakers and social housing and consumers, and of course the actual suppliers and the industry themselves. So I think we got a very good picture, and it was interesting to see that a lot of the ideas, converge, and a lot of the issues, we're all aware of what needs to be done. And I think it's sitting here, I was listening, I was thinking of that expression, I don't know if you all know it, it's, okay, we talk the talk, but now we have to walk the walk. And it's how do we get there? And I think we see that a lot in energy efficiency, and that came through in several of the statements and the questions. We have energy efficiency, with capital letters, and we talk about it as the concept. But how do we actually get it done? How do we bring it into people's homes? How do we make a real difference? And that's something that I took away. It's not just, oh, energy efficiency is, okay, yeah, how? Exactly, what are you going to do? Is it a check? And I think that was very interesting. A point that Peter Lees made, if you just give people a check, then they may not change their behavior. But if you give them the means to have a better house, more efficient appliances, etc., then that can make a long-term difference. And I think that was interesting distinction between just short-term measures, corrections, and long-term results. And that's important for all of us at the different stages, if you will, of the value chain that we talk about in the energy jargon. That's not 15-year-old friendly, maybe, that we were hearing from Anna. But I think that's the next point, information, communication, information, outreach. That seemed to come through a lot in the comments, in both sessions, I think, actually. So I take that away, and it's something that we talk a lot about it, but the question is, how do we really communicate, have massive campaigns to educate, to explain to people. Consumer organizations are key in that effort. And the Spanish organizations are very, very well regarded. People go to their websites to get advice, to try to understand. In Portugal, when I wanted to get a heater, because we don't have installed heating and poor installation in our homes, I went to the Portuguese Association's website to see which was the most efficient kind of heater, what's a good one, what's a short-term solution that's going to cost me more, and there's all kinds of useful advice. So I think if we give people tools, they can really take control, but you really have to give them the tools to do that, and all the support and advice, and the language, the right level of language and information. So that's something that I think was really reinforced through today's discussions. Also, this idea of short-term versus long-term. I mean, we have an immediate problem right now, and there are some measures that need to be taken and discussed, but is that really the path for the long-term? And if we're going to be in a renewable, decarbonized system, society, what do we actually need to plan, and how does it need to work? And I think that was something that Christian raised,
that really we all need to be thinking through how to design something that's really going to work for what we need and what we see coming. But not only the design, I think that was also a very important point from Anna, which struck home for me personally, was this: we all need to change our chip as a society. We need a philosophical review of how we live, how we engage with energy, and with all the economic sectors. You know, how many shoes do we have in our closet that we really needed to buy? You know, all of these things contribute to how much energy we need and how much it costs us in the end. Another thing I took away was this balance or tension, you might say, between the protection of consumers, which is, as regulators, is very much our priority, but then at the same time, the price signals that incentivize them to change their behavior, to change their chip, and to ensure that the system can manage all of us and all of our different needs and all our different priorities as individuals. So I think that's also very important. The price signal is also relevant for the other side. You know, there's two sides of a coin. There's the consumer, but there's also the system, the producers, the energy sector. They need to work together. They're not, I don't think they're opponents. We need to see them as, you know, one exists for the other and vice versa. And so we need to work together to, and if you will, there's the regulator in the middle. And we're trying to make sure it all works in the interest of both. The system provides for consumers, and the consumers allow the system to continue to, if you will, to fund itself and to finance itself and have an interest incentive in continuing to do business. And so I think those were some of the key takeaways I had. There's so many other ideas, but I don't want to keep everyone all afternoon. And maybe a little publicity now from CEER. And we've heard a lot already from Stefan and from Jana. But through CEER, we are trying to look at these questions. And we're very much interested and concerned also because as national regulators, you know, it applies to us at home as well. It's not just Brussels, Europe. It's very much help for ourselves for how we can improve our own markets and our own consumer frameworks, if you will. So we've talked a lot already about our revision of our guidelines of good practice on comparison tools, but we have other work on the green offers. We're trying to develop some guidelines and some good practice there, and that's something that's we've been working on as well as reporting into the Dublin Forum, for those of you who know, the European Commission's event signature framework for discussions on consumer and energy issues. We also regularly, I think this is our third one, do report on reducing power losses, because the system itself can be more efficient. And the less energy and electricity we lose through the system, the more we've also saved, and also financially. So that's also an important angle. That's for the engineers in the room. That's also very important, power losses. And of course, we're looking at electric vehicles, not just the technical, administrative, data exchange, the grid things, but also the interaction with the consumer, with the client who goes to the charging points, and what do they need, how can it work, can they have, you know, if they want to travel between cities, between countries, what do they need for that to be able to happen? And you know, what rights do they have in terms of their billing, etc. So lots of different aspects, all very, very much on the agenda, but also in a more structured way over a longer term, in addition to the immediate crisis and the extreme situations that we're all trying to address and to tackle now, because consumers are facing real problems today, and that's something that we all have to deal with besides our reflection papers and analysis. So I think I'll leave it there for now. It was a very, very interesting afternoon, at least for me. I learned quite a few things, and I'm very glad that we were able to be here and there. I hope you also enjoyed it, and you're always welcome to contact us at CEER. Any questions? I think all our details are online, and we're on LinkedIn and Twitter. So anything you'd like to share with us, we're always hungry for input. So thank you very much, and a good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you very much, and a thank you from me for the great and comprehensive summary just now from Natalie and Jana, and to everyone who stayed with us this afternoon, all our speakers, all our attendees. The current times present an unprecedented challenge, but also an unprecedented opportunity, I would say, to engage people in the world of energy. And the big challenge is to protect those who are vulnerable in particular, and at the same time, as Christian said, to incentivize change, because ultimately we want to be heading for a different kind of energy system going forward. And it comes down to what Anna said at the end. What are our needs, and what kind of a future do we want? And for that we need conversation, and I think this afternoon was well a good start to that. So thank you, everyone. For those of you lucky enough to be present physically here, there are drinks and something to eat outside, I understand. For those of you joining us from afar, I hope you'll treat yourself to something similar at home or at the office or wherever you may be. Thank you very much, and see you again soon.